As our first talk, we've got Maguire and Curtin, and we're looking back at some of the successful big waves of animal rights in the past. So John was involved from the early days in the ALF. He's been involved in many things, I think, no doubt you'll tell us. And JJ was involved in what I think was a very successful shack campaign, and kind of become the shack model, and many other protest groups have taken up, like the anti-fracking movement. And yeah, they're going to introduce us to the history of animal rights, and give us a sense of where we might be able to go in the future.
Right, hello. Anyone who's heard me talk before, please bear with me, but we've got a very limited amount of time, because normally I like to go off on complete tangents, but I'm going to really try, for once in my life, keep it a bit focused. So, history of the animal liberation movement. Hopefully I'll get into the time when I was actually involved in it, but I really want to start with me, what is a no-brainer. And I've been on this theme for years, and I get a very mixed response. 50% responsive, like, oh no, here he goes again, going on about sort of hippie bullshit it seems to get attached to. And then the other half, like, genuinely want to hear the history of the animal liberation movement. There's only one place you can begin the history of the animal liberation movement, and it's India, 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 India. There is nowhere else to go. And when you talk about building a mass movement, here it is, great to be in the Brighton Centre. You know, I remember, if we'd just done this maybe 10 years ago, if we'd done it 20 years ago, we'd be in a little church hall 4 miles outside of Brighton city centre, and there'd be like this many people, maybe at the whole fair, and we'd all know each other. And here we are now, so we're on the way to the minute, we know we're on the crossroads at the minute, we're heading towards what truly it looks like it's going to be a mass movement. But I just want to remind everyone in this room that we've still got so much catching up to do to the work that was done in India. Because we're not talking about what happened in India. If we begin it, it's very difficult to know where to begin, because you rely on written history, and a lot of history of India wasn't written down, because there were clever people who think it would be a no-brainer to write things down, but writing things down produces books, and that gets to be dogma. But India, India, India. So, really you could begin it with Buddha, but even Buddha didn't come out of a vacuum. Buddha was, in Buddha's time, was a lot like now. There was a lot of, India was going for a big transformation. It was maybe transforming from a pure agricultural society to one of markets and trading and cities. So they too were at the crossroads. And when you get insecurity and mayhem, this is also when you get positive groups of us sitting around to think, problem solution sort of thing. All I do know, and we don't know much, is at the time of Buddha, and it doesn't matter what Buddha said or what Buddha didn't say, because we'll never know. All you can say is that vegetarianism wasn't just part of a small little religious group. It wasn't even across India. It took over the whole of Southeast Asia. I want to move on, but if you ever want to look into perhaps the greatest ambassador ever for animal liberation, even greater than Buddha, a guy called Emperor Ashoka. Has anyone in the room not heard of that name? Could you put your name? Emperor Ashoka, incredible. He led Buddha's fight. Buddha was a real historical character, lived about 500 BC. Emperor Ashoka, he was about 250 BC. He was called the Butcher of India. He's from a warrior family, and he had many famous, horrible, bloody victories. His wife was a Buddhist. One day he walked through a battlefield and was just knee-deep, literally knee-deep in blood. There was like tens of thousands of bodies. Went through his road to Damascus thing, got turned on to Buddhism and Jainism. I must mention Jainism here. Does anyone here not know about Jainism? Jainism. Okay, really interesting. If you look at the history of India around the time of Buddha, remember that's 500 years before Jesus, you won't find too much in the Buddhist scriptures. You must be vegetarian. We can't do any killing. We've got to be vegetarian. Like animal rights people, we like it spelled out simply. That's not available so much in Buddhism. It's much more. They talk about love and compassion, and you have to put the pieces together. The Jain religion, which is a massive religion, it's not as big as what it used to be, but they used to run India for a while. Their absolute tenet, their absolute central premise is non-violence. So check out the history of the Jains. So Emperor Ashoka, he he got hold of Buddhism and Jainism, and what's in the name, Buddhism, Jainism? What he called it, the Dharma, and he just sent emissaries to Sri Lanka, to Burma and Thailand, just spreading the word, you know, and it happened bit by bit. All we do know, that still to this day, and I'll move on now from India, still to this day, if you wanted a steak and kidney pie in India, for some reason, you have to go down the street, Mr. Singh's Cafe. If you know a bit about India, you know that's not the place to go to. If it just says Mr. Singh's Cafe, because that means it's in India, the default means it's vegetarian. If it doesn't say anything, of course it's vegetarian. And that's maybe what we're going to be heading to in this country if this vegan thing carries on like it. Well, maybe we're going to be there in 10, 20 years or something, where the absolute default. In India, you have to look for, if you want to steak kidney pie, you have to look for the sign non-vegetarian. So, if we're going to talk about the history of animal liberation movement, India has to come into it. If you look at the history of vegetarianism, you'll always find in history, there's always been that person in the village that covered their ears when the pig was being killed. You know, pigs would get killed maybe once or twice a year and they'd feed the village with it. But there would always be someone, you know, vegetarianism is often linked. The only time it's embarrassing for vegans if you're a sort of anarchist, no gods and all the rest of it. There's a real strong link in history between religious cults and vegetarianism. It's asceticism, you know, like people fasting and the rest of it. The link with like people, the Cathars. You ever heard of the Cathars? Very interesting people. You know the Jainism, maybe you haven't heard of Cathars. Very interesting people to look at. They were fully vegetarian, little obscure little religious cult in the south of France that got burnt to fuck by the Pope. They got surrounded eventually. They got, I told you it was going to come on. They sought sanctuary finally. They were being chased by the Catholic Church because they just wanted to wipe them off the face of the earth. They took sanctuary in Toulouse. The people of Toulouse took them in. But then the Catholic Church surrounded them, the armies, and the main military man said to the Pope, because they'd only taken a few Cathars in, they just, yeah, you can have sanctuary here. He said, how are we going to tell which one are the Cathars? And the Pope just said to the general, just kill them all. God will sort them out in heaven. So, if you see the link between vegetarianism and religious cults, it's there. Apart from India, where it just took over. It just took over, you know? And still to this day, you know, it's one of the only countries still in this day, when you tell people in India you don't eat meat, they're just absolutely delighted. It's like, what do you do that for? Where'd you get your protein? They're just happy, you know, it's just that's still alive today. It's going down the pan a bit, the India thing, because they're adopting all the Western practices. Blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah. One thing I would like to mention, because the history of the animal liberation movement, I don't ever get a Union Jack and go like that, but there is a connection between England, Britain, whatever you want to try and call it, and the animal liberation movement. There was a time when I got involved in the early 80s where if you looked at a list of direct action, it was a bit white, Northern European, Germanic, Scandinavian, and you sort of but thank God now it's all global. The animal liberation movement has just gone all over the world and you can't put a colour on it. But there was a period maybe where you could. But to me it's a very interesting reason, again comes back to India, is that Britain went over and fucked over India, screwed it. But because of that, we've got, it was a two-way thing as far as culture. We went to India because of the trade and the merchants, lots of stories came back. It shocked Western society, you know, because they had this story that we are the originators of Western civilization. They had the time scale that I think 1600 years ago was the flood. They come across India, there's these people living like Adam and Eve did, you know, in the Garden of Eden, at peace with the animals, you know. It was a shaky time for the church when India was discovered. But basically what that did, if you look at the history of the poets, Byron and Shelley, they were all affected by this new news about India. There is a place where people live in harmony, where people treat animals as our brothers and sisters. And England was at the very centre, as you all know, of the slave trade, the global slave trade. But any time you get at the centre of war, you'll get peace activists. So because England was involved in so much violence, and so much domination, and so many crimes throughout the world, it was also the place where a lot of activists got together to fight it. And you'll find that the people that fought slavery, they set up the RSPCA, you know, Wilberforce. The same people that fought slavery fought the RSPCA. You can see that in any social movement in England. The suffragettes, you know, when they used to finish the hunger strike, they used to meet at a little vegetarian restaurant outside of Holloway. So there's nothing new about this animal liberation message. It's as old as the hills. You haven't really ever had a movement in this country of animal liberation. You did at the start of the 20th century, late Victorian times, because remember it's called the Royal Society for the Protection of Animals. It wasn't ridiculed then, like it was in the 20th, because things go like this, things move, you know? And at the late 1800s, early 20th century, animal welfare was high on the agenda. You'd have demonstrations in London with thousands of people demonstrating and rioting about vivisection. A lot of times it would be the pro-vivisection people who would riot. You know, you've got the story, if you ever want a good story, look up the Google, the little brown dog affair. Very interesting. You won't believe how many people were on the streets at that time, way back then, about vivisection. But for one reason or another, the 20th century, it saw the industrialisation of environmental degradation, it saw the industrialisation of animal abuse. You had the 2 world wars. As far as animals go, in Britain, we just fell asleep. It just became the RSPCA. What was a radical movement at the times of the anti-slavery campaigners and the suffragettes had just become basically, without insulting, because I don't want to insult anyone, but let me just call it the cat and dog brigade. There's nothing wrong, it's great to look after cat and dogs, but that's what the animal movement had become. Woof! Take us on to the late 60s, early 70s, you've got all the hippie stuff in the air, you've got revolution, this liberation front, so it was a no-brainer. Bing! A couple of people sit around the table, come up with the idea with the animal liberation front. To begin with, it was called the Band of Mercy, but it was literally a couple of people. They'd already started hunt sabbing, which at the time very radical. If there was one constant we've had since that day, because the animal liberation movement since the early 70s has gone like this, and it's gone in roundabouts. But if we've got one constant in our movement, it's hunt sabbing. Hunt sabbing, there's people out sabbing today, and they'll be doing it in a pretty similar way to what people did way back then. It doesn't change the way subgroups make their decision making, it's all local group based. It's the one constant we've got. So early 70s, finally we get put on the map about this, the hippie thing. You've got people like Ronnie Lee, a woman called Sue Smith, who just get around with this idea, look, we're going to go sabbing tomorrow, but we can only go to one hunt. And then someone just come up with this stupidly ridiculous idea, well, why don't we go out tonight, go to one hunt kennels, knock the hound van out, then they can't go hunting tomorrow, and then we'll go sabbing tomorrow, and we can do 2 in 1. Whippy. Simple enough idea, but that actually really radicalised society. People sort of, a very, very small movement you're talking about. You're talking like the animal movement, when it began, is like literally as many people in this room. But it's changed the world, what those people in the early 70s carried on doing. People like Ronnie Lee got put in prison for a couple of raids on laboratories, doing some damage. When he got prisoned in second time, he really thought, oh no, you know, like, because he couldn't be out there, you know, mobilised, and he thought, oh no, you know, he thought people are just going to be put off by it. But once people saw, hang on, there's people going to prison in this country, I thought we were a nation of animal lovers. And it mushroomed, and then it comes a time when I'm sort of nearly getting involved, the late 70s, because we've got the punk energy. So we had the hippie energy, which come up with the liberation thing, and then we have the shattered dream, which is not quite happening, then we've got punk. And I think punk was a really important ingredient in the animal liberation movement. It was a perfect partnership. The first local group I ever went to, the woman called Jill Phipps was there, and the Phipps family, Nancy Phipps, but it was a complete selection of people, you know, there was no class to it, there was no, you know, some rich people, there was a doctor, a teacher, and there'd always be a couple of punks, you know. And right from the outset, when I first got involved in punk, for me it was my teenage education, and it gave me that education of like, fuck authority, fuck the system. And when you put that into maybe the sort of Thatcher's Britain, the anger that was on the streets in this country, the Brixton riots, the big riots we used to have in London, we were angry and we were on the warpath. And I think a difference to what happens now with the vegan manifestation, which you'll go on to, how we do it for time?
Yeah, right.
we attacked animal abuse. We attacked animal abusers. We didn't really think in terms of having too many vegan fairs and going for each individual, you know, like we went for the animal abusers. And my God, we did go for them, you know. And it's too easy to create a golden age, you know, all back in the day. But we were on fire, and there wasn't many of us, but we worked together. Like I said, if we'd have had a vegan fair, there'd be this many people there, but we would have all known each other, and we were like sort of soulmates, blood brothers, you know, because we shared so much of our campaigning together. And basically, you knew a lot of the vegans in the country, but because how the movement was set up. And I was sad to see its demise, and I would love to see it come back. It's like that thing, you've got to go along with change, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Everything was based on local groups. When I joined the movement, I joined it through an advert in the paper that I saw. I knew that I wanted to get involved in the animal rights movement, because that's another story, but I knew it. I'd gone through my own little road to Damascus thing. Right, where's this animal liberation movement? I was living in Ireland, I came back, I wanted to find it. I saw an advert in the paper, local group meeting. This is, if I wanted you to understand anything else, this is the point I'd love you to understand, that the movement, when I joined it, that Coventry group, we were part of a network, and between us, it's very difficult to explain how we did it, but we ran the movement. We ran the movement from that Coventry group, in conjunction with the Birmingham group, and the Leicester group, and the Manchester group, and we had the Midlands regional groups. Now it's all social media and contacting people in Australia. This was like, we worked together locally, and we had eye-to-eye contact, we had lots of arguments, but at least we had them face-to-face. And it's a very anarchist-based thing now when you look at it, how the local group network, it's a form of magic, how it actually, you know. And people talk about networking. I'm talking about, when I say we used to kick ass, you know, there was periods where we could get hundreds of people at split-second timing to, say, gather. One raid we did Wickham Laboratories. We did it in broad daylight. This animal laboratory, one of the few only animal laboratories I've ever known. It's actually in the middle of a housing estate, basically. We raided that place at 11 o'clock in the morning. There's a great story to go along with that. But it meant we had to get about 200 people together at split-second timing. He's talking split-second timing from all over the country. So when people talk about the beauty of social media networking, we did it very well, thank you, back then. I actually think, obviously we weren't able to network with people from Sri Lanka and Australia, but between us, I think we did a much better job of social networking without social media than we do now, because it's all like, because say like, if we were going to discuss something controversial now, racism, sexism, some ism or something, and we were just going to text each other. Imagine how horribly wrong that can go. Rather than saying something, having been in the same room as someone, what the fuck you on about? Having a good old bang, you know, a good old proper argument, which you've got to have, because an animal liberation movement, we're like a family, so obviously things are going to come on. I'm talking like a maniac, so I'm trying to get through. The only thing I wanted to understand is that how could, so it's as simple as that. How the local group network was. The national societies, the BUAV, Animal Aid, NABs, they didn't run the movement. They followed what we did in the local groups. You think, well, how the hell, if you're a Coventry group, and a Birmingham group, and a Rugby group, and a Brighton group, and a Portsmouth group, and a Southampton group, and a Bristol group, how can you make any decisions? We just did, somehow, you know? And a lot of it, I think, worked on the basis of a lot of trust. We all knew each other, and when people came up with a campaign, you didn't have to discuss every last single detail with it. Someone else was going to run the campaign now. If you liked what you heard, you joined it. And the local group network, it wasn't vegan, it wasn't a vegan group. Now a lot of animal rights groups are vegan groups. We've just set up a little group in Coventry, and I hope local groups get upset everywhere. And I said at our first meeting, I don't want this to be a vegan group. If it turns into a vegan group, I'm going to leave. You know, because I want people to walk through the door and someone like, are you vegan? Oh, no, I want anyone to walk through the door, and if that's someone who looks after the pigeons in the local town, please, welcome, sit down, you know. I'm not going to ask you what you have for breakfast, you know what I mean? If you care about animals, this is the group for you. And I think I'm a bit scared of this. Maybe we're getting a lot of power now with the vegan. And I'm just worried in case it becomes a bit exclusive or a bit, I don't know, a bit like any cult could become, you know? So basically, the movement I joined was extremely radical, is not the word, but we weren't radical for a political way, for a left-wing way. We just were. We were fucking angry, and across the movement, the idea was to attack animal abuse. And I would say that the vast majority of people involved in the animal rights movement in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, you could say, were absolutely pro-direct action. It wasn't really discussed, and we didn't do a lot of discussion about ethics and morals and debates. We just got on with it, and there was everyone had their sort of fingers. People talk about the Animal Liberation Front as if it's some little clandestine organisation. There never has been an Animal Liberation Front, and I'm not using poetry there. How can there be? There's no membership, there's no office. There used to be a little bit of an office, but the police obviously busted that. There's no constitution, there's no one that keeps the minutes, there's no treasurer. It doesn't exist. The Animal Liberation Front comes from that local group network where you joined your local group, you went to 10 meetings, you eventually got to find out who was who and what was what. Because you can just tell, can't you? And once you become friends with someone, then you have a few conversations where you think, yeah, but they'd be coming out and smashing some butchers' windows or getting some chickens. That's what the Animal Liberation Front is. Small groups of friends acting not totally independently, but largely independently. But there never was an Animal Liberation Front convention where we should discuss which targets we're going to attack. But by our own nature, sometimes it was a meat industry, sometimes it was a vivisection industry. Things seem to come in big cycles and waves without anyone pulling the reins. And I'm sorry for my waffle, but we'll have some questions and answers at the end, and hopefully ask me something, because I've just been trying to get through but I'm going to pass you on to now. So I've taken you up to a point, I can't explain how crazy it was and how much direct action was. Everyone you knew has gone to prison. I used to go to prison like a revolving door. Like now, with the police sometimes put restrictions on people when they come out of prison. You can't associate with people who've got criminal records. Wow, you know, I haven't got hardly any friends who haven't got a criminal record. Maybe now, I call the new generation, and I'll finish on this, and I don't mean it as an insult, I promise, because I'm starting to put my tentacles back into the movement, and I'm really impressed about what I see, but I call it the new Care Bear generation. The Care Bears, and I don't mean that as an insult. They're like, they're genuinely lovely people, dead nice, vegan as hell, they're harmless, full of hope. Whereas the society, the generation I come from, we were a lot more angry, had a lot more bitterness, and you could say a lot more hatred. Hatred's not the best thing. But I definitely had a load of hatred, loads and loads of anger, but we were kick-ass, and we stuck out. I think maybe now, if you look at the vegan movement, I don't know if we stick out compared to the environmental movement. Then we stuck out because of our absolute embracing of the direct action ethic. Don't ring the police, don't ring the RSPCA, don't get the petitions, do it yourself. We managed to kick ass, and we managed to build a picture of ourselves that was absolutely huge, that we did a lot of smoke and mirrors, you know. There was only so many of us, and we all knew each other, and we were a tight little club, but when we needed to, we could come together in big numbers, and it was all those little, small local groups coming together.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, John. And I was asked to do the talk today by Mark, because I've done one at the Animal Rights Gathering, which is an annual event once a year. And I did my talk on the Shack campaign, which I was involved with for a few years. And Mark asked me to do a slightly different kind of talk today, but also to include Shack campaign, obviously, as well. And he asked me to do on the history of the animal liberation movement. I said, yes, I'll do it on one condition. I can have John doing it with me, i.e. he can do most of it. But no, John was there, you know, since the early days when I was in my pram, basically. I didn't get involved till the late 90s, so about 99, and the reason why I got involved, it's someone doing the street still in my local town, but it was the Hillgrove Cat campaign, why I got involved, and that was successfully closed. It was a breeders, they bred cats for vivisection basically, and they had hundreds of cats in this cat farm. And after, it wasn't too long, was it, the campaign against them really? Once,
6 months. Maybe.
yeah, once they were really targeted, they folded, they closed up. So the people that run that campaign,
Brute force, wasn't it?
yeah, it was like bang, 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 straight, yeah. And so they moved on from that. They thought, what can we go to next? And just at that time, there was a documentary on Channel 4, Dispatchers, and it showed inside the laboratory, Huntington Life Sciences, and it was undercover footage of the workers there pulling a beagle out of the cage, and they were trying to inject the beagle, and obviously the beagle was trying to pull back, so they were punching the beagle in the face, and they got it on film. And it went all around the country, and the country just went mad. And so the people who just successfully closed Hillgrove Cat Campaign for this is the next target. So they formed Stop Huntington Animal Cruelty, SHAC. And the main basis of this was to close Huntington Life Sciences, but it was going to be a lot harder than Hillgrove Cat Farm because it's a multinational, international company, and you can't just close them like one small business. So there had to be different tactics. First of all, it was obviously going to the lab and mobilising people and protesting outside, and even people successfully got in a small number of occasions. But as the months and even the years went on, they obviously started to cotton on to that, and they started to build their big security fences, all their CCTV. The police really started to get involved, protecting them. The police become their private security, basically. So, and then they started to get injunctions, which was stopping us from doing legal demonstrations. So then the movement had to come up with a different way of targeting the HLS, and there was injunctions, so you know, we can do things legally. So that's when people started to do things illegally, which would be the Animal Liberation Front started to do attacks on cars, buildings, any company basically linked to a Huntington Life Sciences. So you've got your suppliers who supplied equipment, you've got the customers who had their products tested at Huntington Life Sciences, because HLS were a contract testing laboratory. So a company will approach them and have their products tested, and it's everything from ink toner to pharmaceuticals to food additives. Absolutely everything is tested there and still is today. And so obviously it was, like I was saying, it was quite hard to target the actual laboratory itself. So every customer and supplier was targeted, and this was done quite done by good tactics, really. That the laboratory was watched by activists at certain places and times, etc., to find out who these customers and suppliers were. So quite often a lot of these vans and cars going in and out were followed, because a lot of them were unmarked. They didn't want to be marked going into the laboratory for various reasons. So they were unmarked, so people would follow them, sometimes for hundreds of miles, and you'd find out where they'll go. You keep following them, and then they end up going to some warehouse depot, and there is a big sign outside the depot, so you know straight away who they are. It's some sort of supplier. So when they were found out, the suppliers, they were the SHAC campaign, Stop Huntington Animal Cruelty. They'd done a newsletter which basically listed all the various companies who were dealing with Huntington Life Sciences. So you had the suppliers, but then you had the customers and also all the financial backers. And that was done via, basically, on the internet, finding out who the shareholders were. And it's quite complicated stuff, so there was generally some one or two people just doing all the financial stuff, and they were really good at that. Yeah, so the campaign went on for a number of years, targeting Huntington Life Sciences. And at that point, which was the early 2000s, the SHAC campaign was the biggest thing in the animal rights movement. Was watching this, and the majority of the direct action in the country at that time was focused towards HLS. The direct action wasn't quite as big as it was in the 1980s, the amount of direct action and sort of liberations, etc. But there was a hell of a lot of vehicles being damaged and buildings being damaged, and that was at that time, the Animal Liberation Front were focusing on that, which was economic sabotage. So basically try and put the company out of business by affecting their profits, which is a good tactic which has worked throughout the years, and I still think it works today. So you really have to do your homework. If you're targeting a certain company or anything really, don't just target that company, do your research, find out who they are, who they do dealings with, business dealings, find out everything about them, who works for them, where they're based, and you can then gather all that information together and you can put that into the campaign. And the Shack campaign, that was a legal campaign, but the magazine, which was released every few months, it had listed all the actions within the magazine, and it also had all the addresses and all the companies of the suppliers, etc. And so the magazine kind of left it to you, the public, to do whatever you wanted, basically. It didn't say do this, it didn't say do that, but it also didn't say don't do that. So people took matters into their own hands, and yeah, so there was a lot of vehicles and buildings damaged, etc. And that's when the government started to realise at that time, in the early 2000s, that this campaign was a big threat to the third biggest industry in the UK, which was the pharmaceutical industry, which is a multi-billion pound industry. And it was so big financially that the government actually at the time, Tony Blair and then Gordon Brown, stepped in, and they were having meetings with the big pharmaceutical companies, because these big pharmaceutical companies were saying, if you don't stop this campaign against HLS and the likes, then we're going to take our business elsewhere to other countries. And that was when basically the government brought in, it wasn't until 2005 they brought in a law under SOCPA, which was the Serious Organised Crime and Police Act. And what this law was basically, if you caused any sort of economic sabotage to a company, then you could be charged with this offence. And now it only covered companies linked to vivisection. So if you were to do this, similar actions against, companies selling arms to Saudi Arabia, then this law wouldn't apply to you. This law was specifically brought out just for animal rights protesters. And it was used over the years. Myself, I went to prison for it, and there's a few of us, and a few of my co-defendants went to prison for conspiracy to blackmail. And the two charges, basically, they were pretty much the same thing. The difference being that conspiracy to blackmail carried a maximum of 13 years, and the offence which I got done under SOCPA carried a maximum of 5 years. And so some of my co-defendants did actually receive 11 years, well, one of them got 11 years for basically running the Shack campaign. And the judge even admitted himself that although there's no evidence to suggest that she carried out any of this direct action, she was the founder of the campaign, so she was done on conspiracy. And that's how they got all of us in the end. That's how basically, Mark was saying earlier that the Shack campaign was successful, etc. And it wasn't successful in what we wanted. We wanted to close HLS, so in that we completely failed. But it was successful in a way that the Shack model, which was the type of campaigning which we'd done at that time, was picked up by international campaigns around the world. And I believe that the Shack campaign has influenced various campaigns that are still going around now around the world, and obviously they've inspired various activists. So in that sense, I can see that it's successful, such as the fracking movement, and they're having some good success really with their protests, etc. But yeah, so I was asked to do this talk today just to give a bit of a history on the Shack campaign, really, because it was such a big moment in that time in the 2000s, and it wasn't just UK based, we took it internationally. About 2004, once the government started to bring in all the laws, all the injunctions, even stopping us from going in offices. Prior to that, we were running inside offices with megaphones, throwing everything about, leaflets and that, causing the noise. But then they started to come down hard on us, because we were being successful. So they started to bring in all these new laws, people were up on charges, people were going to prison. So we decided to take it international. We thought, well, we'll just take it into Europe because they're not really so on it in Europe, the authorities. So we started to, shack activists, various ones, would go to France and Germany and Switzerland, Finland, Sweden, and there would only be a small number of us, and we'd go over and we'd meet other people over there. Quite a lot of the times it was in squats, and we was meeting like what John was on about earlier, loads of punks, because they've always been quite active. And so we'd have these meetings and we'd talk about the campaign, we'd talk about our tactics, similar to what we're doing today. And then we'd go out on demonstrations with them. But at that time we were able to do a bit more in Europe than we could in the UK, so we were sort of running inside the offices with them. We've shown them how it should be done really, and so we did that. And then obviously when we left a few days later, then various towns and cities which we visited, they set up their own local shack campaigns. So they were doing all these demonstrations, we weren't even there, they was running inside the offices. And they was then sending all the footage and photographs and reports, demo reports, to the shack website, which was then reported. So it was basically, it was linking the international movement, and I believe that that period in time really inspired various groups around Europe, not just Europe, in the world. And that's why I'm proud that there's a few people here I see today who know a lot about the Shack campaign and were involved themselves as well. So even though we completely failed in closing the Huntington Life Sciences, I'm completely, being proud of part of that movement, which I'm sure John is proud of being everything he's been involved in as well. Even the times where you've not been successful, because if you don't try, then how do you know what you're going to achieve? And you've got to speak to other people really, you've got to network with other people. Obviously it's different nowadays because you've got the internet, you talked about social media before. In the old days everyone knew each other, even back in the early 90s and early 2000s. You go to certain meetings where you get all the local groups meeting up, and everyone pretty much knew each other, or if you didn't know that person, then your friend would know them really well. So there was a good connection. Nowadays you've got social media, you know everyone, but only because they're your Facebook friend, and that doesn't really mean much because, like you're saying earlier, you're getting all the arguments over the internet, and if people just met up and argued in the room, I think it would be solved a lot better. So that's why on social media I really try and stay away from slagging off certain groups, certain people. I rarely do it. If you're going to do it, I'd advise just doing it off record basically. Go and speak to them privately, or even at a local meeting, but never over the internet, because it doesn't achieve anything. It just creates witch hunts. Whether you're right or wrong, I think it creates a bad situation. So yeah, where does the movement go now? And it's hard. Over the years, since the early 80s, since the 70s really, the Animal Liberation Front and the whole animal rights movement, various direct action campaigns, it's not been a solid line, it's not been an up line, it's been going in different waves. And when I got involved, it was on an up after being on the down for a few years. But once the Shack campaign got closed down by the authorities, once we all went to prison, the line just went straight down, and the whole movement changed basically. That was in the late 2000s. So the time I was in prison and the time I was on bail and on licence, etc. By the time all that ended and I could speak to people, because like John was saying, I weren't allowed to speak to certain people for years. I weren't allowed to go on demonstrations, etc. But that time, sort of the 2013 onwards, the whole movement changed and veganism started to explode. And that's where we are now. I think we're in that same generation, which I would say is about the third or fourth generation of the animal rights, animal liberation movement. So, where do we take it from there? But I do think it's important that people do read about their history, and if you go on the internet and just read about it, even Wikipedia, you've got the history there, it's quite easy to do. take advice from some of the older activists, like, sorry to call you older, don't I mean, people that have been around longer. Listen to them, take advice from them.
Yes and no, isn't it? But also go, fuck you up, man. So, you know,
if they're
we're the Care
completely
Bears,
wrong.
we're not having it, you know? What, if I could gain one thing from the talk, it was about the local group. Think about that, the local, let's set up a local group. Oh, have you got one in Brighton?
Yes.
You have several, yeah, you probably have several because you all hate each other. That's another common pattern. We've always had the one in Coventry. But, what was I going to say then? The thing about, I talked before, and you've talked about going to prison, smashing this, doing this. We live in weird times now. Surveillance states, I carry I used to get followed by the police in person, It's like, my God, Sometimes we'd be on the case for 6 weeks, I remember once, night and day. They'd be following you, physically following you, sleeping in the cars, moving across the house, across me. But now, I've got my little mobile phone. They don't have to do that anymore. They know everywhere, and I take it with me everywhere I go. They can tell everyone to sit next to you. But so I used to give a lot of when I used to give talks. I used to get asked to do them, and I used to give quite inflammatory, inciting talks. That was my ambition out of it because I was doing stuff, and I wanted other people to do stuff because I knew it worked, But I've got no right to do that now. Because I'm not doing stuff now because of all your cameras and stuff. I'm not saying don't do anything. All I want to do is big up, like the suffragettes, they call it politics of the smash window. They'd meet in Hyde Park and they'd raffle these bricks off to raise money. Then they'd go into the West End and deliberately smash windows. And they wouldn't smash patriarchal businesses, they just smash businesses in the West End. You think, well, what's the point of that? They knew what they were doing. They called it politics of the smash window. They just wanted society to wake up. The generation that I come from, that's all we wanted to do. Just kick, smash, scream, properly scream. There's something wrong here. Everyone wake up. And in a way, that's the easy job. It's easy to be shocking. It is easy to smash things. You have to take some courage to do it. But once you start doing it, it becomes your normal life. But there wouldn't be this vegan fair here today. Who knows how history would have gone. But if it wasn't for the Animal Liberation Front, if it wasn't for people going out, doing as blunt as that, so, just keep it blunt, smashing butchers' windows. I used to smash them like, it was what I used to do, it was like my job. We wouldn't be here today having cakes and all the rest of it. So let's not sanitise our movement. I'm not suggesting for 1 second, not for 1 second, the way forward is to smash windows. Let's do what... I'm not saying do smash or don't smash, but I want to pay tribute to We've had people die in hunger strike, Barry Horn in this country, people killed. So many of our friends used to go to prison. So let's not sanitise this movement. If it's going to be taken over by the Care Bears, let's go with the flow, like movements move and change. But I don't want the movement to be sanitised. And I'd like to say one thing about the shack thing. There's many things I don't think we've ever done a proper debriefing from the shack thing, because the only thing I wanted to say, and I could say many things about it, but things to learn. Shack was very propaganda based. It was very in your face. It was very, we're coming to get you at the vivisectors. Go away, get out of this country, we had a mob behind us. We had a lot of people. We had post-live exports. You could say you had thousands of people to act as a mob. And I think it's very interesting, the world of propaganda, because being vegans, if you do vegan campaigning, propaganda's like a dirty word, but it's what you do, isn't it? But for me, I wasn't part of Shack, but I used to sit back and look at it, and for me, they were behaving like it was Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali used to say to people, they do the weigh-in and all the rest of it. I don't know if Muhammad Ali's been forgotten about yet, but what a legend, He would say things like this to people: I'm going to beat you in round 6. And it's like, what a terrible thing for someone to tell you. That for all the whole time, boom, 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 round 2, round 3, they just go, they just play with it. They're going to knock you out in round 6, they've already told you. But you've got to be Muhammad Ali to say that, because Come round 6, you've got to knock them out. If they get to the end of round 6, you're really in trouble. You're like, where's your round 6 now? And I think that was the case of Shaq.
We were up to about round 10 and we were like, hang on, it's still going.
But people, as a movement, we began to believe, and I think it had a good effect. It helped the global movement, because they could look at our propaganda and go, wow, check them out. But we had to deal with the consequences of the fact that some of it was a bit, and when it came to it, when the police came to squash us, we didn't have enough strength to fight back.
Yeah, well, it happened really quick. The police, you know, they did it on one day, May the 1st, 2007, which was my birthday. They raided, they raided all our houses, so I spent my birthday in the police station. But they took down basically the entire campaign. In that moment, on that one day, and Shaq did still carry on after that, but it wasn't really the same.
But we don't have to go for, the police came, they're doing their long. This is what the police do, it's what the Romans do.
We all expected it. Nobody come into the campaign and thought, this is a surprise. We always used to say to each other, the only way they can stop us is by going to prison, and we went to prison and they stopped us. So we didn't give up until we were stopped. So that's one thing, I'm not saying everyone should go to prison, but I think that people need to...
It's not that bad. If prison's so bad, prison is bad now though. It's gone a lot worse. We've gone down the American route of gangs and all the rest of it. I've been in loads of prisons, 14 prisons, 4 years I think I spent. I didn't see hardly any fights, I never had any aggro, boring. If prison's so bad, how come everyone goes back to prison? Nearly everyone who goes to prison goes back. So if it was as awful as they try and make it out, that figure doesn't make any sense.
Yes, I actually had quite a good time. I made new friends, and I got to the semi-final of the Port Championship. And, it was good.
And you got loads of support when you went to prison, my God. And the other prisoners, because you'd be a bit of a stranger to them, but when it came to post time, you just got this big bag of letters every day, and the other prisoners would look on, so whatever they thought, well, somebody likes him, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Even the prison guards liked us. All the prisoners liked us. The prison guards, the governors didn't like us too much because they were under orders of the Home Office directly. That's what our barristers told us anyway.
So we've got time for questions.
Yeah, time for questions.
2 minutes for questions. Any questions?
Yeah, can I say something?
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to pick up on both of those. Oh, I can speak loud. I can shout. Your comments about local groups and everything, in a way the Hunt Saboteurs Association works a lot like that, because we can call a mass hit on a particular hunt quite quickly across different groups in an area. So that local getting, and we've got I'm part of West Sussex Hunt, and it works really well. But we do use social media because we use WhatsApp for our group, and so we can get, because I can remember back when we just used to, back in the days of the shore and live exports, and we could get hundreds and hundreds of people just by a telephone tree.
It's hard to understand how we did it, isn't it?
I know, but we did it, and now we've got mobile phones, and doesn't seem to be as easy.
No.
The Shack campaign, going back before then, I think in my opinion, one of the problems was that we rolled over and let the police and the powers that be do it. Because if you think back to, before Hillgrove was Consul Beagles, and that closed, and then with Hillgrove, I was there that day, and it was such an obvious setup when the roof came down and everyone pelting the rocks and things from the field at the roof, and the police, mounted police, all standing back, letting it happen. And it was, I think, one of the first demos where I didn't pick up a rock, because I said to my partner, don't do a thing, they're watching us and they're letting this happen, something's going to go. It was just so obvious. And the people who were sent down were people for a year, and they all got a year, were people who had regular jobs, had never had anything before. And at the time, my next door neighbour was a Crown prosecuting barrister, and I mentioned it to her, and she said, what, a year? That's unbelievable. They've got no previous and they're working. She said, that needs to be full. Let me know about the stuff. And the organisers of that campaign were not interested. And so my feeling is that a lot of the way through, and also with Shaq, is that we never challenged these laws. In America, you could still do home visits, and maybe you still can now, and yet it was banned in this country. And so we actually rolled over and allowed it all to happen, almost like we were all collateral damage.
Well, I agree, challenging it, especially the whole soccer law. Nobody's actually challenged that yet, the 2005 one. It's not really been challenged, but is there anyone willing to challenge that? You know, if someone wants to get arrested under that and take it to court and then obviously challenge it, then I think it would be great, because it could end up destroying that law, really, because I believe it should be illegal, that law, really, in the European Court of Law. But then again, are we going to be in Europe in a few months? Who knows?
Just time for one more question. I was just
Lloyd back down.
I haven't got a question, John, but I think we should let this occasion go without thanking you and JJ and the people like you that did all this work. And you're the real heroes of this movement. I just want to thank you. If only I could speak on behalf of the animals, I would say thank you very, very much for what you've done.
Okay, on that subject, I tried to boycott social media, and I did, and I'm still boycotting Facebook, but about a year ago on Instagram, doing Instagram, and the word hero, it just gets trotted out. He's a hero, she's a hero, he's a hero, she's a hero. So the word hero, like, you're a hero, you're coming here, all of us are heroes. What's that? I think I've noticed on social media, and the reason me and JJ have come today is just because we got invited and we both got caught. So, unlike hopefully some people in this room who I do know, maybe you didn't get caught, so you're not able to talk about direct action. But the heroes, everyone did, like, to me, my actually favourite people in life, when I talked about, we just set up a group, we promote veganism, but it's not going to be a vegan group. When I think about heroes, I actually think about people like the little old lady who looks after the pigeons. They're my heroes. They don't do the big shouting and the bawling, and we're all heroes. And if I was to say one last thing, I don't know, it's a really odd thing, I think, because social media is odd. And there seems to be a thing where people do things for the liking, to get liked. And that's a very dangerous world. It's a very dangerous to do things like, look at me, I'm doing it. And I do it myself. I do it myself now. Look at me, I'm helping animals. And it's never the reason. Well, it is maybe the reason some people get involved, but the reason you get involved isn't because of, like, you know, and when you place a compliment here, it's a bit cringy sort of thing. But all I want to take up was the word hero. Everyone who comes today out of the zombie nation into this Vegfest, because zombification is taking over, we're all heroes. And that word hero, I think, to me, heroes, Ronnie Lee is a hero. He changed world history, you know. Him and a couple of other people. And Emperor Ahsoka and Buddha. The rest of us just do what we do.
If anyone's interested, I've got these magazines. It's a fairly new animal liberation magazine, The Agitator. Some of you may have heard of it. I've got issue 1 and issue 2 here. They're only £1 each. All the money goes into issue 3. So this is great. It's not been a magazine like this in a long time, since the old days of, like, Archangel and
immediately,
etc.
look, smash the pheasant shoots. I mean, that's...
Yeah, it's got some really good artwork as well.
How to smash the pheasant shoots.
How to liberate chickens, everything. Really good interviews in there with some activists as well. Cheers, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Thanks to our animal